The early 1970s were a time of sit-ins, peace rallies, and environmental activism, a trend reflected in the next monster outing from Japan, 1972's Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. This time, Japan's best-loved lizard was used to deliver an ecological message about his homeland's serious pollution problems.
Feeding, growing ever more deadly on smog. Nothing man can do can stop the smog monster.
You had something called Yokkaichi asthma in the city of Yokkaichi because the pollution in that city and all over the nation was terrible, and this film kind of addressed that problem.
Other casualties are expected to exceed 30,000.
Will Godzilla, man's friend, be vanquished?
It's like a Godzilla film for the youth generation of the early 70s. You had these nightclubs with the liquid blobs being projected on the walls, very groovy, and the girl dancing wearing nothing but what appears to be body paint.
But despite trendy storylines, Godzilla seemed to be a weak imitation of his once dynamic self.
Godzilla ran out of steam in the mid to late 70s, and movie-making styles had changed so much then. There were a lot of zoom shots, and there were kind of crazy plots, and the Japanese were imitating a lot of James Bond ideas where there were secret agents and people from outer space. It was nutballs.
But if Japanese monsters were slipping at the box office, they remained a beloved fixture on television, thanks to reruns and the Saturday morning cartoon series, The Godzilla Power Hour.
Up from the depths, 30 stories high, breathing fire, his head in the sky, Godzilla, Godzilla.
I grew up in Los Angeles where every Sunday afternoon they would play on the Creature Feature the old Godzilla movies, and I would watch these growing up, and I loved the films.
And for the next 3 decades, Godzilla would be a reliable giant in the world of advertising and commercial marketing, where his image helped sell products around the world.
A lot of things from Japan have reached America's heart.
Holy cow, it's the monster!
Some big and some small. This year, Chevrolet is bringing you 2 of the smaller. New Sprint Turbo imported to go like a bat out of Osaka, and Chevy Spectrum with European styling that's built in Japan. Put yourself in today's Chevrolet and listen to your heartbeat.
That just shows how popular Godzilla was internationally, that, you know, here's this creature from Japan, this uniquely Japanese monster that is so well known around the world that it'd be used to sell, you know, almost anything.
By the mid-1970s, collecting Godzilla was becoming a big business, and since then the size and sophistication of the Japanese monster collectible market has continued to grow.
The U.S. put out a model kit. It was through their Aurora model company, and that was a big success. Japan recognized that, and they started to put out their own little vinyl toys based upon a similar likeness. And since those were so popular, they just decided to hit all the main characters like Baragon and Rodan, Ghidorah.
The rarest toy in my collection would no doubt have to be the bronze Godzilla. That's the goal of every collector, to obtain that figure. And when I got that figure and opened it out of that box, I was just amazed and in love with that toy.
Depends on your budget or how intense you want to go. There are collectors that just live Godzilla, and I imagine their house is just nothing but Godzilla. They probably name their pets after Godzilla monsters.
Toho's been very savvy about connecting with the Godzilla fan base. They've produced a high-end series of toys, computer games, comic books. So they know how to capitalize on the followers of Godzilla.
By the mid-1980s, Godzilla wasn't only living on collectors' shelves. After a decade away from movie theaters, he was ready for another big screen close-up. In 1984, Godzilla's creator, producer Tomoyuki Tanaka, decided to take Godzilla back to basics with a direct sequel to the 1954 classic that started it all. The result, Godzilla 1985, went on to become a financial success across Japan.
This film was distributed in the United States by New World, and they came up with this great idea of bringing Raymond Burr back to reprise the role that he played in the first Godzilla film. What's interesting is that his character in the first film was called Steve Martin, but by this time, Steve Martin, the actor, was really popular and well known, so they were afraid of calling him Steve Martin on camera because they thought people would laugh, so they just called him Mr. Martin.
After the success of Godzilla 1985, Toho handed its revived franchise off to a new generation of movie makers. But after a decade of hit sequels, Godzilla's box office fire was once again fading. And in 1995, Japan's favorite monster met an explosive end in Godzilla vs. Destroya.
Godzilla vs. Destroya, Godzilla actually nukes out at the end and he has a meltdown. It was a pretty exciting film, and you kind of feel sorry for Godzilla at the end when you realize that this might be his last stand.
The poetic thing about all of this is that Tomoyuki Tanaka, who produced the first Godzilla film, shepherded Godzilla throughout his entire career and actually produced Godzilla vs. Destroya, and Tanaka actually died 2 years later. He followed the monster throughout its entire career up to that point.
When Animal Icons returns, Japan's most famous monster goes Hollywood.